Jake went there tonight with friends.
Correct. It's a local hangout, especially on college night. It's not uncommon for him to be there with some friends, and we were woken up by a knock on the door. A friend of his was there, said, "You ready?" He says, "I'll be right behind you. We're going to finish this game of pool." Got home. For whatever reason, he found out about it through social media or the news or whomever, and him and his dad immediately came to our house and banging on our door with concern. So we've been trying to get a hold of him since probably 1 o'clock.
I see the anguish in your eyes, and I see you constantly calling and checking your phone. Is his phone ringing or just no answer?
It's ringing. It's ringing several times and going to voicemail. But that's unusual for him not to answer. He'll answer me morning, noon, or night. So.
We're following breaking news. 13 people are dead, including the suspect and a sheriff's deputy after a mass shooting at a Southern California bar. Let's go to NBC News correspondent Joe Fryer, who's live in Thousand Oaks, California, where it happened. Joe, what's the latest?
Mika, what we can tell you is we know that 13 people have died. That includes the gunmen. 11 of the victims were patrons or people who were inside the Borderline bar. Another victim is with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, a sergeant who was responding to the scene. It was a little bit after 11 o'clock here in California when witnesses say a gunman came inside the bar. It was a busy, popular night filled with many college students, and the gunman started opening fire. At this point, we don't know much about the gunman. He has not been ID'd. We know he's a white male who had a handgun. What type of handgun, we don't know at this point. But it was just a short time ago that the sheriff disclosed that 11 people who were shot inside the bar were shot and killed within 3 minutes of 911 receiving calls. A sheriff sergeant, Sergeant Ron Heelis, who was in the area, and a California Highway Patrol officer responded to the scene. Within minutes of that, they heard gunfire and went inside the building. Sergeant Heelis was shot multiple times. The Highway Patrol officer was able to rescue him and pull him out. Sergeant Heelis was taken to the hospital, but he did die a short time later. He was a 29-year veteran of the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, well known even by the sheriff, who says he used to work out with him. The sheriff says that he informed Sergeant Heelis' wife tonight that he had died. A hero. Mika.
And Joe, the Ventura County Sheriff also pointing out that Sergeant Heelis was just about to retire, getting ready to retire, but rushed into that bar and lost his life. Can you characterize a little bit, Joe, what kind of place this was? The Borderline Bar and Grill. We know it was college night, which tells me on that one night they let kids under 21 into the place, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Who all was in the bar when the shots rang out?
Oh, just talking to the Sheriff's Department, they believe at least maybe 100 people or more were inside there. We're talking about mostly a young crowd, college students. There are a number of colleges within, say, 10 to 15 miles of this area, including Pepperdine, including California Lutheran University, and a few others. Those schools have actually put out statements saying they're checking to see how their students are after this incident happened. So largely a young audience, a young group of people inside, but we also do know there was an older man I talked to who was in there with his stepson playing pool when the gunman burst in and started firing. Joe and Mika.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe Fryer, at the scene. We'll be checking back in on that breaking news, horrific story. We're following some pretty, I think at this point we can call this a pivotal time in American history in terms of politics. With us, we have White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour, Yamiche Alcindor, associate editor of Commentary Magazine, and an MSNBC contributor, Noah Rothman. Editor of The New Yorker magazine, David Remnick, is with us, and former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, and an MSNBC contributor, Joyce Vance. Good to have you all on board this hour. So let's just recap. Tuesday night, Americans gave the Democrats their biggest House gains in a midterm election since Watergate.
It was crushing, actually.
It was a crushing.
Look at the Northeast. We talked about it last hour, but what did we talk about after Donald Trump won? That people should focus less on Hillary Clinton if they wanted to judge the state of the Democratic Party, and more on the 1,000 local races they had lost, legislative seats they had lost over 8 years. That's devastating. It only took 2 years of Donald Trump for Americans to throw out 333 Republican state legislators. Trump has done more destruction to his party in 2 years. I bet that's a record, actually. Than Barack Obama was accused of doing over 8 years. A devastating loss that goes to the core of the GOP.
So the difference that we're seeing today that could impact the world, literally and definitely the United States of America, is that this president for 2 years has been unchecked by his complicit Republican Party. He has been unchecked, at least publicly, by members of his own administration. And in some cases, it's really surprising what has been allowed to happen, to pour out of this presidency in terms of lies, untruths, sowing doubt in people and the press, and dividing this country in a way that even brings the word hate back into the foray, into the center of the focus of the presidency. And he's been unchecked every step of the way. And now every question, every lie can be checked.
What can be checked?
Every question can be answered.
There's no... And the Democratic House will do that.
They're already starting.
But the press needs to do something too. The press needs to learn how to react to Donald Trump a little better. Need to learn when he's throwing smoke bombs out to distract from the fact that he faced an extraordinarily humiliating loss on Tuesday night. They didn't do a good job yesterday. I just have got to say, everybody was focused on the outrage.
Of the Sessions firing.
Of the Sessions firing.
And the Whitaker thing.
Anybody that is Maggie Haberman was tweeting about this. Anybody that follows Donald Trump and has followed Donald Trump for as long as like Maggie Haberman has and others in New York have,
should see
they
the
know
patterns.
what he's doing.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, he's going to fire Jeff Sessions, which he said he was going to do for months. And then he picks a fight with Jim Acosta. He might as well have gotten one of those, one of those boxing clowns that you just punch and go down, because he would have as much feeling for that as Acosta. Acosta was a prop. No, listen, I don't think anybody should send their reporters to the White House until Acosta gets his pass back. But just say that. Get that out of the way, and then focus on the devastating losses. And David, I'm not saying this to kiss up to you, because as you know, when you come to this set, we never kiss up to you.
I'm so sweet to you.
I think, actually, Mika is so sweet to you. I think 1,000 years from now, I hope that what you wrote on election night, or we'll just say 50 years from now, how's that? What you wrote at 2 in the morning on election night, predicting what was going to happen over the next 2 years, back in 2016. Yeah. And then what you wrote this election night, which was... It's worse. It's worse, but at the end, though, what do you say? You say, Democrats, do a better job. Keep your head. Don't chase him down all those rabbit trails.
Look what's at stake.
Look what's at stake.
We
Keep
have
your focus.
You could pick out 4 gigantic, earth-shattering, literally earth-shattering subjects that no one has discussed at all. Not in the campaign, not in the aftermath of the campaign. We're discussing Jim Acosta. But we're not, if we're going to discuss Jim Acosta, let's discuss it properly. Not as a dumb show.
Or hair on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What exactly happened? This is an authoritarian move. He deliberately called on Jim Acosta. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. And then he threw him out of the White House. It's a working reporter. A working reporter. And then he accused him of mauling the young intern, the female intern that came up to take the microphone away. This was a kind of staged event.
Well, and we have
to
Yamiche
say what?
With us. Yamiche was told she asked a racist question.
It's preposterous. Preposterous. And it's not the authoritarianism that we remember from 50 years ago, or totalitarianism from it's not that same style. But he's sending messages and arousing the base in the same way and saying, look over here. Don't look over there. Don't look over the fact that the climate is changing to such a degree that we're going to be trillions in debt to try to keep up with it, and lots of people are going to die and be displaced. Don't look at that. Don't look at the fact that all these people were killed last night and it happens on a regular basis. Using God knows what weapons that have nothing to do with deer hunting or whatever. Let's not discuss that. And you could name thing after thing after thing. We are, the theater of this presidency is not just the theater. It's a distraction from real life politics and the way we live our lives. And it's destructive every single day.
And how stunning that in the exit polls, immigration was higher in voters' minds, then the economy, and then most everything else. Noah, you wrote and tweeted about the depth of these Republican losses. You've also been warning Republicans for the past 2 years not to follow Donald Trump down rabbit trail. And yet yesterday you had Donald Trump mocking Republicans who lost, firing Jeff Sessions, who a lot of those Republican senators have very warm feelings for. So now you have a reason for Republican senators to be angry at Trump and for House members to be angry at Trump. And you also have the lesson of Mark Sanford. Yes, Donald Trump, way to go. You knocked Sanford out. A Democrat now owns his seat for the first time since 1981. What Republicans are going to be dumb enough to follow him over the next 2 years politically?
Yeah, I mean, the Republican Party has a problem insofar as they know that Donald Trump is the most popular person in their party. They have their own careers to look after, and they have to at least show some deference to the most popular person in their party, or else they're going to get ousted in their primaries. But you have the incentive structure begins to deteriorate, as you say, when Donald Trump becomes a less powerful electoral force. His pettiness has the potential to bring him down. There was an anecdote in the New York Times post-mortem on this election cycle in which the governor of Iowa had offended him somehow, and so the president shunned her and did his best to undermine her. Now, she survived. Mia Love, too, may yet survive, even though she got a lot of heat yesterday from this president. This is going to be a pretty awkward situation, and these lawmakers now have are less inclined to be deferential to the president if he's demonstrating that he is not the force that he used to be on the campaign trail, that he has no love for them, and so they can go their own way a little bit, and that's something that I think the president might end up regretting.
Willie, I don't know if you know this or not. I don't like to talk about it. I was in Congress.
Get out.
No, I was. I can't.
Remember the year?
It was about 7 years after I won the Masters.
That happened.
Which was again 87, right after Nicklaus's
Overshadowed by Jack.
Yeah. Seriously, hole in one on 18. You would think somebody. It's par 4, by the way.
Okay.
I think somebody would have noticed that, but they didn't.
Big hitter off the tee. Yeah.
I am. But when I ran in '94, Gingrich aggressively ran against me. He did everything he could to help my opponent win the Republican primary. And just following up on what Noah said, I was a free agent. I went to Washington. Every time I was threatened to go, what are you going to do? Run against me again? I got 62% the first time. I'll get 80% the next time. So he goes after the Iowa governor. The Iowa governor survives. He attacks Mia Love. Mia Love may survive, but even if she doesn't, again, we're starting to see that the emperor has no clothes. And also, these voters in these districts aren't dumb. If they realize that by electing Trumpists in the primary, they're going to lose the general election, I find voters usually can figure this thing out. You see the difference between the 2010 Republicans and the 2014 Republicans. 2010 Tea Partiers shut down the government. 2014 Republicans won primaries. More the Chamber of Commerce crowd.
Well, present company excluded, politicians are transactional, and they can read the field. They can read the field, and if they see a weakened president, and they see the examples of people who won in suburban districts distancing themselves from Donald Trump, they'll be emboldened to do that. But David, to your piece about the Democrats, I heard, and Noah was up with me, thank you again, at 2 o'clock in the morning, all the way through Morning Joe on election night. I heard Democrat.
You look fantastic.
Thank you very much. Yes, still awake. 3 days later.
Almost
Thank you. Yes. Democrat after Democrat on set with us and off, talking about Democrats needing to just focus here and not jump right to impeachment and not to have a tantrum that's been pent up for a couple of years now. What does that mean to you as a practical matter? How should Democrats conduct themselves?
I think we shouldn't underestimate Donald Trump's political power with his base. I would bet that the Republicans in Florida feel that his presence there, his almost constant presence there, helped them out. But it's hard to know.
That is the one swing state. That's Donald Trump's state.
Yeah. So there's that. I mean, he still has a very powerful base that he speaks to in a kind of almost mystical, because of almost mystical connection, no matter what he does, and they forgive him everything. So that remains a powerful thing. When it comes to impeachment, I think people old enough to either remember or read about, remember that impeachment in many ways backfired in the Republican Party when it happened to Bill Clinton late in his second term. So it has to be very methodical. The pieces have to be in place. At the same time, parallel to that, you have the Mueller investigation.
Yep.
I think you can say many things about Robert Mueller. One thing you can't say is that he's a fool.
So, exactly.
He had to be anticipating, you know, this set of events that was going to come. And so what happens? And from what I understand, and we know very little, I don't want to pretend that I know much, it has to be that if there are a lot of indictments to come, they have been held in reserve, and
But the Democrats I'm talking to didn't even raise the word impeachment. Nancy Pelosi's asked about it, and she said infrastructure, infrastructure.
It's a trust-building cycle for Democrats. The October survey from the Wall Street Journal NBC News poll showed that Democrats were just a little less, the Democratic brand was a little less popular than the Republican brand, even in this cycle. They have to approach this with a lot of humility.
So let's go there with Joyce Vance. Joyce, take your pick. The fidelity of the Mueller probe, the firing of Sessions, and whether or not it was legal, and all this in light of the Democrats' new authority.
There's so much this morning that it really is hard to pick. But I do think the most important point, and I'm mindful of Joe's caution about not following all of the bright, shiny objects. For Justice Department purposes, what we need to focus on is that we now have an acting attorney general handpicked by the president because of his ties to the White House. And that lack of independence is a very dangerous thing, certainly in context of the Mueller investigation, possibly, likely in other regards as well, because it's the independence of the Justice Department that serves this country and the rule of law so well. So we need to focus on what happens at DOJ. We need to make sure that the Mueller investigation is fully protected. That probably requires action on the Hill. And these next few days will be very telling as we see whether Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein continues to lead the Mueller probe or whether that shifts into the new Attorney General's hands.
So is this CNN analyst and weightlifter that Trump selected? If he takes that position, can he take that position legally? Isn't that against the guidelines of the Justice Department? Isn't Rosenstein the one who's supposed to be running DOJ right now?
So there are a couple of different paths for succession, and under the normal DOJ rules, this should fall to Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. Alternate succession paths would possibly let the president appoint someone in this position. It's unusual, it's not completely unprecedented, but buttressed by the fact that we now have an acting attorney general who is on record supporting limitation, if not termination, of the Mueller probe. That makes the decision to go this route even more suspect.
Hey, Yamiche, if we can turn just for a moment, talk about the room you were in yesterday with the president and that press conference where the president said one of your questions asking him about white nationalism and being a nationalist was, quote, racist. Just the tenor of that room, what it was like to be inside for those bizarre 90 minutes.
Well, I think at first the feeling in the room was in some ways light because President Trump was almost making fun of Republicans that lost. He was making that critical distinction between him and the Republican Party, saying Donald Trump won, the Republican Party lost some seats, but I as an entity am still a good brand. And then he started getting questions from reporters about voter suppression, about his ad that was deemed too racist, about the idea that he was saying that the caravan was invading this country when it's not. And then, of course, my question, which was about emboldening white nationalists. And it was then that the press conference that had been, I think, going in some ways smoothly for him went off the rails. He was really pacing back and forth, and it became something of a tussle of a back and forth between reporters. And I think by the time he got to my question, he was already exasperated and already angry at the fact that reporters were asking him, I think, reasonable questions about how this country is doing.
Yeah, and I was concerned yesterday for the president's own sake how he was doing. Let's look at the clip.
You know, I keep hearing about investigations, fatigue, like almost from the time I announced I was going to run. They got nothing, zero. You know why? Because there is nothing. They can play that game, but we can play it better. because we have a thing called the United States Senate. If that happens, then we're going to do the same thing, and government comes to a halt, and I would blame them. If they do that, then it's just all it is a warlike posture.
Would you consider removing Mr. Mueller from his position?
I could have ended it any time I wanted. I didn't. I could fire everybody right now, but I don't want to stop it because politically I don't like stopping it.
Your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood.
They're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
Right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
I tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his butt.
Well, I'm not
like
a big
the rest
fan of
us.
yours either, so
I understand.
To be honest.
The rapper Little John has said you called him Uncle Tom. What's your response?
I don't know who Little John is.
He was on The Apprentice.
I don't know. Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Because you told her you have the highest approval among African Americans. It's just 8%, sir, single digits.
See, when you talk about division, it's people like this that cause division.
You called yourself a nationalist. Some people saw that as emboldening white nationalists. Now people are also
I don't
saying
know why you'd say that. It's such a racist
There are
question.
some people.
No, why do I have my highest poll numbers ever with African Americans? Why do I have among the highest poll numbers with African Americans? I mean, why do I have my highest poll numbers? That's such a racist question. Honestly, I mean, I know you have it written down and you're going to tell me. Let me tell you, it's a racist question.
Do you remember, Willie, the Seinfeld, when Kramer fell asleep in the tanning bed?
I do.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Okay.
And now you have something on the Google machine.
We got one of the Google machines. You recommended I get
Google
one. So I
machine.
picked one up.
What did you find?
They're good.
There's a picture of then host of Celebrity Apprentice Donald Trump with Lil Jon.
You can't be expected to remember everything.
He can't be, yeah.
That was 2013, though, in fairness. It was a while ago.
It's a long time ago. All right, so, David, so much to digest.
Watch that.
The question is, what are our friends and our enemies, more importantly, overseas, thinking when they see that performance?
Well, I've had a couple of reporters from the New Yorker just doing exactly that in Western Europe and elsewhere, and diplomats are freaked out. People are freaked out. They watch something like that, and they expect a certain range of behavior from any leader, much less the President of the United States. This is so far out of the range of the expectable or tolerable that it requires a clinical evaluation rather than a political evaluation. Yamiche asked a perfectly legitimate question. It's a tragedy that it has to be asked of the President of the United States.
But it has to be asked.
Of course she has to ask.
When David Duke himself says, thank you, Mr. President.
He stands up and
basically
applauds,
admitting that you're a white nationalist.
And he's in a corner, and this is one of the frightening aspects of the post-election moment, is that on any given day, Donald Trump is unpredictable, erratic, all the things we know. When he's in a corner, when investigations heat up, when indictments accelerate from the Mueller investigation, when House committees chaired by Democrats start to heat up, his behavior is not going to get better. It's going to become like that times 10.
And
that's frightening.
And Joyce, what would you recommend to Democrats that are going to be investigating Donald Trump? How would you recommend they conduct themselves over the next 6 months?
It needs to be done the right way. It should be methodical. It should not be a scattergun investigation. There should be a focus on ethical lapses in the administration, a focus on congressional oversight, and I think in many ways a willingness to let Bob Mueller finish his work and let him handle the criminal side of the Russia investigation and see what evolves. It's so easy for us to forget how quick and how efficient Mueller has been. Really, he's on a record pace for for any sort of a federal public corruption investigation. We need to let him finish and see what he finds, and then Congress can determine what its legitimate function is once the facts are disclosed.
Joyce is exactly right, and following up on what David said about the Clinton impeachment. You know, Bill Clinton actually did well in 1998. In the midst of the controversy, he, in fact, I think he only lost 3 or 4 seats. The Republican majority actually went down to 4 seats, and it was Newt Gingrich that was run out of town, not Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton's approval ratings went up to 60%. So Democrats need to look back, as David was saying, at the lessons of 1998, 1999.
Take their time. David Remnick, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Good to see you. It's good to see
Thank you as well. Yamiche Alcindor, good to have you on this morning. Good luck covering the president today.
Great work.
Keep asking your
Great
questions. Still ahead on Morning Joe, Nancy Pelosi has the president's backing for Speaker of the House.
Oh, that's good.
But does she have her own rank and file? We're going to ask Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio next on Morning Joe.